So to get started, my name is Diana and I'll be speaking and also moderating today's call. So first I want to thank the speakers for their time to share their experiences and also allowing the stream to be recorded so folks can watch it afterwards if they weren't able to make it today. So I do want to quickly just talk about Tech Plus Mentorship, which is the organization that's putting on this event. We're a student-run org that puts out programs like this one and our mentorship program, Coffee Chat Initiative, which is also going on right now, resume critique, mock interviews, and all with the vision to cultivate a more inclusive and diverse tech community at Waterloo. So there's a lot of work to be done there, and we've just gotten started, and we hope you enjoyed the event today. So back to the event logistics. We have, I believe, 7 speakers today covering 3 different continents, so you'll be hearing from them very soon after I'm done with my spiels. And we've saved time at the end of the call for a Q&A. So each speaker will be spending a little of time talking about their individual experiences, and then we have the Q&A at the end to answer questions. So just send in your questions in the live stream chat, and Clive and myself will be collecting the questions to ask them to our speakers at the end. We also asked you to send us any questions that you might have through the sign up form. So we've also collected that and we'll be asking those first in the Q&A session. All right, that's all I needed to get out of the way. So without further ado, let's get started with our first speaker, Leslie.
Hi, so I hope you guys can hear me. Let me know if you can't. But I'm Leslie, and I'll be sharing my experience in Norway. So to start, the photo you see here is of the Norwegian Opera House in Oslo, and it was actually 5 minutes from our apartment. So this photo was taken by me, but yeah. Okay, next slide. All right, so this most recent term, so from January to May 2020, I worked at a company called Cognite. So if you're unfamiliar with Cognite, it's about a 300-person startup at the moment, and they deal with enterprise software. So they work with companies in various industries, so like power and utilities, manufacturing, oil and gas, etc. And they basically help these companies get access to and manage their data. That's Cognite in a nutshell. And my role, I worked as a front-end developer / product designer. So I was hired through Waterloo Works as a front-end developer, but since Cognite is a startup and the team I joined was pretty small at the time, and there was no dedicated product designer, I kind of adopted that role as well. So it ended up being 50-50. And then if you look at the video on the right, you can see that's my workspace. And I also worked on a project called Air. So Cognite, when I was working there, had 3 to 4 business applications. And when I joined, they were starting up a new business application from scratch. So I joined at a really interesting time. And my team was small, as I mentioned, so I got a lot of ownership. And it was just really fun to work in general. All right, next slide.
Wait, sure, 1 second. I just went on the live stream, I couldn't hear, but I don't know if it's just me. Oh, okay, sorry, it's just me. All right, next slide. I feel like I'm having the most number of problems today.
No worries. All right, so on the left, you can see a little boomerang Instagram video I took, and that was right outside our apartments. And so Cognite has a set of intern apartments, and as I mentioned, it was right in the heart of the city, so like 5 to 10 minutes away from the city center and like the busiest street, and also 5 minutes away from the Opera House. So it was honestly the ideal location. If you look in the center picture, it looks like some really good food, and so yeah, basically Cognite catered lunch, which is super exciting. And basically they give you these meal cards that you can tap. And in the building, there were a bunch of restaurants on the first floor, as well as a canteen, which is essentially like a buffet. And that's where we ate every day. There was also a bunch of snacks and coffee and smoothies, etc. But in terms of dinner, if we weren't bringing food from work home, then we would cook. It's not really common in Norway to eat out that often, and people usually just eat out on special occasions because the food is super, super expensive. Like you can't expect to get a meal from even McDonald's for less than like $20 Canadian. So we did a lot of cooking while we were there. And then if you look at the last video on the right-hand side, that was like our office pet spot. So Cognite does a lot of research with robotics, and we were super lucky to have a partnership with Boston Dynamics. So we had a little dog to play with in the office, which is really cool. In general, the work culture in Norway is similar, but not exactly the same as North America. So it was pretty similar in the sense that it was also a tech startup. So we had a lot of the same things like stand up and like the workflow tools that we use here, like Slack, Confluence, etc. And also the team at Cognite was super diverse with a lot of expats. But one thing that I noticed is that Norwegian culture is definitely less like individualistic than it is in North America. It's definitely more team oriented. And something that one of my coworkers told me was that someone like a Norwegian will hire someone knowing that they'll replace them because they know it's better for the team, which was super surprising to me. And also in general, Norwegian culture is like pretty easy to adapt to as a Canadian because everyone speaks English, everyone spoke English at work. And yeah, you can get along fine just knowing English and like no Norwegian at all. One thing though is people who have immigrated there, they've noted that it is sometimes difficult to make friends with Norwegians because they keep to themselves and they're less outgoing than people are used to in North America. So that's something to note. Next slide. Yeah, so another cool part of my job was I got to travel. So in the like on the left side, those two photos was from my first business trip, and I actually went on my first business trip within the first like 4 days of working. So we flew out to one of the other offices in Norway on the west coast, and that was super cool. And then the photos on the right side are from like a week-long retreat I went on with my team, and it was half like for work. So we did a bunch of like cool courses and engineering, getting to know our users. And it was also fun. Like we went cross country skiing and did a bunch of other cool stuff. Yeah, next slide. Yeah, and outside of work, this was my first time in Europe. So I really loved traveling and experiencing different countries. Unfortunately, due to COVID-19, we had to stop traveling after the beginning of March. But these were some of the places that we went in January and February. Yeah, next slide. And in addition to traveling to other countries, we also explored Norway itself. On the left side, you can see some pictures from a road trip that we did, which was one of like my favorite trips I've ever been on. And we drove along the coast, the west coast of Norway, and yeah, it was just beautiful, like super scenic. And yeah, I really loved that trip. And then on the right-hand side, unfortunately, I didn't take those pictures. Us interns, we had a flight and Airbnb booked to go to Tromsø, which is like super north on the map, as you can see, to see the Northern Lights. But unfortunately, we had to cancel everything due to COVID. But I would love to go back and see them for myself in person. Next slide. Yeah, and here are just some of the videos that I took from the road trip throughout Norway. And as you can see, it's a beautiful place, and I definitely recommend anyone to travel there. They have the opportunity to. Next slide. Oh, okay. One thing I wanted to note was due to COVID-19, we did have to work from home, unfortunately, but Cognite took great care of us. So we were living in the intern apartments, and there was a shortage of desks, and they quickly ordered everyone a desk, delivered them. They shipped all of our equipment, and it was overall just super comfortable. And they also gave us a meal budget because we couldn't get lunch from work, so they gave us money to buy food every day, which was really nice of them. And then in general, I wanted to answer some questions. So the first one being, what are some lessons that you learned? I think the most important lesson that I learned was appreciating hobbies and just the importance of not having your life being determined or defined by work. One story that one of my colleagues told me was in Norway, it is seen as good or a positive to have a gap on your resume. So if you have a gap between school or between jobs, people appreciate that because they think, oh, you've taken the time to travel or work on yourself or spend time doing your hobbies, which is very, very different than that of North America. And I've always wondered, why Scandinavian countries are ranked the happiest in the world. And I think it has a lot to do with this, just the appreciation of life outside of work. And also, would you recommend working in Norway? Like, absolutely. I think it's easy to get caught up in like the North American tech culture. And going abroad, as I mentioned, has definitely helped me realize that things in life other than work are equally, if not more important. Um, yeah, and one thing I wanted to make sure to mention is that Gracie also interned at Cognite, who will speak later. So she has like other valuable insights as well. So feel free to ask her questions too. Yeah, but thank you so much.
Cool, awesome. Now I'm back in the struggle of making sure that I can be heard, but so I hope I am. So thank you so much, Leslie, for sharing your experiences in up in the cold north with us. So I'll be going next, talking about my time in Switzerland. Well, so I wanted to start off with just like some things that like was like a kind of a part of my day-to-day slash work. So I was a software engineering intern at Google, and how I got that opportunity was I was a return intern, and so there was an option to ask for your return offer to be like moved into like the European or the Asian pipeline. And so I asked for Europe because I had a chance to work out of the Dublin office as a part of my first internship, and I loved it. And I was like, I want to go back to Dublin. And then their positions filled up before I made my transfer. So I was like, well, Zurich, it's still in Europe. So I went, and then I absolutely loved it. And here's why. So, so here are just some things that like we did at work. My role was a software engineer on the Google Shopping team, and so I worked on implementing some like scheduling tool for some like evaluation thing for merchants. Not super important, but it was like mostly backend and a little bit of data work. So my typical day looked like some of these things. So you can see a photo of the building, the work building up on the top left. And then we had cheese at work at like lunch every single day. And I think also dinner. Happy hour every Friday, had beer. I think this one was like Oktoberfest, so there was pretzels too. And then winter season, we had like mulled wine at like lunch and dinners. And my team did an offsite, and we flew some like I think they were like sports drones or something. And then there was like a fun little baking and getting to know Swiss culture event at work where you make this like Swiss bread. I can't remember what it's called anymore, but it looks like a person. And I had it for breakfast where the head fell off. And then two things that were like a part of my like absolute day-to-day life were the bottom right was my walk to work every single day. So you can see very beautiful European buildings. And then the apartment I lived in, like I noticed a lot of Swiss elevators were really small. And this was especially small. Like you can see that like it would fit me and like a single luggage, and that was it. But so I thought that was like a huge difference in like how people's lives with elevators worked. The work culture was kind of different, I think. A big thing was like a lot of coworkers, while they were like they could speak English and we all spoke English, there was definitely like some sort of like a language and cultural barrier. My coworkers came from all over Europe, so it was diverse in that sense, but it was like a diverse set of Europeans, but like essentially nothing else. And the other big thing I noticed is like some of them were a bit more like kind of conservative. So I did sometimes hear jokes made against like women at work, and that felt kind of crappy. So I didn't love that. And I just didn't feel like people were more as aware about like inequality issues in Europe, or sorry, in Zurich as like people are in North America. Yeah, so that's everything there. And some more photos about like life in Zurich and Switzerland. So I wanted to showcase some of the foods that are like very Swiss. So in the middle, you can see this is called raclette, where you put raclette cheese in this like little cute oven, and then you like scrape on your plate with like potatoes and things. And you may have seen this like on like Instagram, where like they have like a cheese wheel, and then they heat up the cheese wheel and they scrape the cheese off of the cheese wheel. That's the other version of raclette. And then underneath it is like Swiss mac and cheese. So that is a thing. They have like bigger noodles, and they eat it with like applesauce and I guess kale on the side. And then there is like the famous Swiss fondue. Uh, in the top bottom right corner. Well, directions are hard. And then bottom left, you can see this is an Alphorn, I think. It's a Swiss traditional instrument that someone was playing in, I think it was their capital city, but I can't remember where I was. And then top right was like their festival thing in like November. There was like a festival season and people were just like dressed up and playing music on the streets. And then top left is cute Christmas lights that like that the city just looks like that during Christmas time, which was pretty lit, like literally. So it was not hard to adjust to local. I wasn't too hard adjusting to local culture. I think a big difference that like every single expat in Switzerland notes is that so there are a lot of expats, like non-Swiss people in Switzerland, especially in Zurich because of people going there to work. But what people say is like it's incredibly hard to like make friends in like Switzerland because of just the way that Swiss people are. Like you can become like acquaintances and stuff, but to become like friends, for them to consider you as friends, it's like it takes years. So that was like very interesting to hear. I was like, oh, I thought I was gonna come and make friends. But I just make some friends, but they weren't like really Swiss people. And so next slide, I wanted to highlight some a little bit of travels, but also just getting involved in like tech related things even while you're abroad. So I guess bottom right, as most of you can tell, is not actually abroad. This is like E7. So I was running Hack the North during my internship. So I flew back to run the event. So you can see there. But the other things are from hackathons or the Major League Hacking Hackon event, where so I went to those events and I spoke, and I got to meet some really cool people. And then one of them, one of the events actually happened in Berlin during Oktoberfest. So you can see that like a bunch of Hackon people, you might recognize some MLH people in this photo. And in this photo, we went to Oktoberfest and got to experience that life. And then here in the bottom left is me and some friends going to Junction, which is a hackathon in Finland during my internship there. So like the very left of this is Sheila, who was working at Cognite at that time as well. So that's everything there. And that's kind of like what I did in my free time. And then last few things I wanted to go over with like more free time things is, and I guess like a little bit of cultural stuff is CERN, for those who don't know, has like, is I guess mostly based in Switzerland. So you can go and like see parts of CERN, and the like inner nerd in me was just like so excited when I found out like here's like a drawing of, I think that's a Large Hadron Collider on the side of a building in CERN. You can see some like traditionally Swiss things. Cows are extremely Swiss. And this was actually a really cool, I think it's called blind dining experience, where you can go and it's completely dark and you don't like see anything, and all the servers are blind, and you just get to get a little taste of like what it's like to have the privilege of sight like taken away. So that was a part of accessibility week at work. So I thought that was like super interesting and super unique because I didn't really get to see this much outside of Zurich. And I think I'm just going to wrap up with some things. Whoa. Right. Okay, let's see. So here are just some more photos of like beautiful places I got to go. For any Sherlock fans, Reichenbach, oh, fuck, I just said that, butchered the name, but Reichenbach Falls is in Switzerland. So that was actually like Sir Conan Doyle based it out of that location, I believe. So you can get to visit that place, and you can see a ticket I have there from going to Reichenbach. And I think the biggest lesson I learned was to just try things that like you didn't plan for, because I didn't really plan to go to Switzerland. Like I wanted to go to Dublin, and just like do things that like aren't necessarily what like everyone else is doing. And like I went to Zurich for this internship in the fall term. There were essentially no other undergrad students interning then, because like interning in the fall is a very like Waterloo and North American thing. So every other student there was like a master's and like PhD student. So my best friend ended up being this PhD student who was like 28 years old or something, and like the stage of her life that she was in was just so different from mine. And I think I was just like, my perspective was just broadened so much from like being really good friends with her and like learning from like what she's thinking about at that stage of her life. And so to wrap my section up, I would 100% go back to Switzerland. Those who have interacted with me previously know that I like don't shut up about my time in Switzerland, and definitely would consider just like a non-Canada or US location to work at in the future. So yeah, that's everything from me. You've probably heard a lot from me from these past minutes. And next we have Sharon talking about her time in London.
Okay, cool. Hey everyone, I'm Sharon, and I was working at Facebook London as a front-end engineering intern. I worked on the catalog team, which is under like the ad business org. And so if you run a business or anything, this is where you come to upload your products, to manage your inventory, to show on like IG shopping and Facebook ads. This is where all the product information gets pulled from. I actually recently graduated from computer engineering, and now I'm just at home. Next slide. Yeah, so I actually got to London because previously I got a return internship offer from my New York term. And honestly, I was just like, let's just try London because why not? I guess I've been really focused on location throughout all my internships. Like I've done California, Seattle, New York, and now I went up to London, which was fun. So just like any other Facebook internship, you get housing, and it took me around like half an hour to get to work. So it wasn't the closest in terms of like walkability, but it was close enough to transit that, you know, it was pretty good to get anywhere you wanted, especially because the office area is a little more touristy. And so I think they put us out into more like local spaces. And so, yeah, I would typically take the bus. I like to sit on the second floor of this double-decker red bus. And if you click next slide-ish, so that's kind of where I was, and the office was more in the center. Based on my stars that I use excessively on Google Maps, you know, there's a lot of things everywhere. So it wasn't so much that I was away from all of the city. So in terms of London and New York, really quickly though, pay definitely dropped. London is expensive also. Pay went down about 30 to 35%. And but in terms of like housing and food, I think that covered a lot of things, especially because eating at work, you know, breakfast, lunch, and dinner on the weekdays was all covered. And then housing, I had a roommate for the first half. We had some like test problems. So I ended up going to 1 bedroom, 1 bath housing by the end of the term. But yeah, for the most part, I think London was super international. You kind of get everyone somehow ends up in London. The joke is sort of like London is the holding cell because they're waiting for their visas to get to the US. And so that's why in London you get to see all these different people. And yeah, so there's not as much as a culture. There's no like language barrier. I didn't meet a lot of British people, so I still can't do a British accent, but I did get to work with a lot of different people from different cultures, which means the way they work is very different. They talk very directly or just different things that made it a really worthwhile experience. I think I had something else to say. Oh, and so here the photo on the right is of the analog lab, which is something Facebook has in almost all of their offices, which is essentially like an art studio. So they run a lot of events throughout almost every day. There's something going on. So you can drop in if you want to carve a spoon or just make a poster. And so there's a lot of different activities to sort of switch between like working and just kind of laying back a little bit. I think from even that, you can tell the work-life balance that Europeans sort of have. Even as interns, you get PTO days. I don't remember how many, I think 5 or 6 days, but I took around 1 a month. And yeah, next slide, I think. Right. So London is great for art. So I went to the Tate Modern a lot, which is just across the river. Most museums are free. Maybe some exhibits need some you need to pay a little bit for, but overall everything is free, which was kind of surprising to me, but I wasn't upset. And so Facebook also has this other perk, which is called like BFF, which is essentially a stipend that everyone gets to go hang out with their coworkers. So having eaten all this free food at work during the weekdays, on the weekends, you can essentially host an event to go out to eat somewhere. And then again, it's covered by work. And so I don't think I ended up spending very much despite this drop in pay. And London is also pretty expensive. I think it kind of all balanced itself out at the end of the day. Next, please. So there's me in the bathroom at Sketch, which is this like restaurant art place. And in this middle, it was during one of the intern events that Facebook did for us, which is like this city tour. This is more of like the central place of London. So this is pretty near the office. London essentially is just like this other city, this urban city, but with much shorter buildings. Like I don't think anything really that tall. I think that might extend a little bit to other European countries as well. But for the most part, London was like pretty, I'm gonna say short, but not very skyscrapery. I was around when London Design Festival was going on, so I went to that. And there's also a lot of food markets that go around that happen on the weekends, weekdays too. And so there's a lot of like food stalls, little crafts. And in this photo, this very slim photo at this bottom, is from the Columbia Flower Market, which is this market that goes on every weekend, and it's just gorgeous. Yeah, so definitely a lot of things to do, lots to explore in the city. Next. So back to where London is very international. I think you can tell by the cuisine and the food across the city. I don't think I had that much British food. And so like you can get your Japanese food, you can get your Russian food, which is the one on the right. And there's a lot of afternoon tea, high tea. And yeah, those are just a good way to like chat with people, talk, and just sit and have little snacks. Yeah. I think that was it for the slide. Next. So surprise, I also traveled while I was in London. I met one of the previous interns because there was an overlap in our batches. He was working in the summer term. Oh, I was working in fall 2019. And so he's actually from Sweden. And so I ended up going to Stockholm for a weekend. Other places I went to were just like, I went to Morocco, Copenhagen, Amsterdam, and then I ended up meeting my family in Barcelona for our annual family offsite at the end of my term. And so overall, I think between North America working and being in London, especially at the same company, I think you can kind of tell that the culture is sort of ingrained in the company itself, right? Like you'll walk into the building and you'll know it's a Facebook building or whatever. There's different things, like there's always art on the wall, which is a very distinct feature of Facebook buildings. And so in terms of that, I don't think there's much difference. But in terms of people that you interact with, they're definitely more direct, at least the people I got to work with. Like if this was wrong, they'd be like, this is wrong, as opposed to going around and being more like, I think it would be so-and-so, you know, kind of being a little bit passive. And yeah, I think I would totally recommend working in London. It's just a great opportunity for you to travel and also just to be able to work in a totally different, not totally different, like a different place. But yeah, I don't know. It was good. Yeah. Thank you.
All right. Awesome. Thank you, Sharon. And next we have Patrick talking to us about Hamburg.
Yeah, so I'm Patrick, and I worked at the Yelp Hamburg office last winter. And honestly, I think it was just like a great time. So a little bit of background information. I was working as a software engineering intern, and I was on the biz growth team. So what our team primarily were responsible for was to actually kind of help more businesses get into Yelp. So we primarily just wanted to make sure the onboarding was as smooth and as, I guess, like efficient as possible. And so the project that I worked on specifically was actually to try to, when like a new business owner is onboarding a business, I would try to detect to see if there is like potentially an existing duplicate business. And then if so, I'd ask, if this is your business, do you want to claim that? And so how I actually got this job, I'm a really big foodie, as you'll notice later on in the slides. So Yelp was always something that I always loved to use. And so I'd always just like every like Waterloo season, I would just always look at Yelp, see if they had any job postings. And then this one, I guess like this term specifically, I noticed that like not only did they have the San Francisco opening, they also had like the Hamburg opening. So I applied to both, and then so the interview pipeline was actually the same. It was like, at least for software engineer, I'm not sure about for other companies, but at least for Yelp, as long as like you kind of like pass the software engineering interview, you could like you're kind of qualified for like any office that you choose. And then so eventually I chose Hamburg because it just seemed like a great experience, and I've never been to Europe, and I said, why not? Next slide, please. So I didn't really take a lot of pictures of the office itself because I didn't, it was just like I kind of got accustomed to it, but the office is actually amazing. So I guess the office itself was super lively. There'd always be like, every week, there'd be like 2 to 3 events, for example, over here, Best of the Rest. And these like, one thing I noticed, like Germany chips are honestly way better than North America chips. So that's something I really miss. And I guess we also had catered lunches, and the entire office was super friendly. So in the like the bottom of the picture, you can see that was an example of a lunch. It doesn't really look super appetizing because when there was like appetizing lunches, I kind of ate before I took a picture, but the lunches are great. And for the office culture itself, everyone was super friendly and always willing to help you. And I guess one thing that was really cool about Germany was how they had like mandatory days off to really help you kind of like travel or like, I guess, just take a break. And so I guess like German people specifically, they're more kind of rule following. So in the sense that they're really punctual, and they always like during work, they'd always like, they wouldn't really mess around. But that doesn't mean that we don't we don't take breaks, since every day we also like have like Smash Party play, like Smash Bros Party, play pool, and also just we also have like LAN parties. And the office and the company itself was super nice. We also have like a lot of events. You can see in like the top right, we had a lot of company outings, and it was just a really awesome time. Next slide. So so what did I do outside of work? One thing, so I was super lucky to actually come to Hamburg during Christmas season. And one thing to know about, I guess, like I think all of Europe, is that Europeans don't mess around with Christmas. So Hamburg and all of Germany has so many Christmas markets. So and they're all like really different themed as well. So for example, the one over here is kind of a red light district Christmas market. So this would be like, it was really interesting. They had like Santa Claus pole dances, which is a very interesting thing to watch. And there's like a whole different other themes. Like there's like medieval Christmas markets, modern Christmas markets. And it was just like a really awesome place to explore once work was done. And so at least when I went, we had an intern class of, I think we had an intern class of 6. And so that was kind of like our mini squad. And we would just travel together and also explore the city of Hamburg. And so Hamburg itself is like a really awesome city because it has like amazing like nightlife. And there's like a 2-mile, like a street that's like 2 miles long, filled with just like bars, clubs, and like all these nightlife activities that you could do. And so I also attended like concerts and like clubs with my friends. And there's also a lot of other events that you can do. For example, there's like the world's biggest miniature museum. And so primarily in Hamburg, I didn't really cook for myself. I pretty much ate out every single day, and it was pretty cheap as well. So there's like, so since Germany is like, I guess there's a lot of Turkish people living inside of Germany, Turkish kind of cuisine is really prevalent. And one thing that I really loved was something called doner kebab. It's kind of like a shawarma, but it was better, and it was super cheap. And at one point in time, I had it for like 5 days in a row, and it was only like 3 to 4 euros. So it wasn't the most like healthy choice, but at the time I was kind of addicted. And the city of Hamburg itself, it's super easy to travel and navigate, go around. So where I lived was around, I think, was around like a 7-minute bus ride and around like a 15-minute walk. And then Yelp actually gave you kind of like a profit ticket, as you can see on my bottom right. And what that does is it literally lets you access every single like mode of transportation. And I mean like literally everything. So you could go on like the bus, the train, the subway, and even like the boats, since Hamburg is like a canal city. So that was it was really easy to just travel every day. Next slide, please. And so like I mentioned earlier, oh wait, I think wait. Oh, I forgot my slide order. Oh yeah, nice. So yeah, as you can see here, I'm a really big foodie, and one thing I love the most about Germany was actually the food itself. So over here, you can see that like most dishes are kind of like meat based, but if you're like vegetarian or vegan, that's like it's not a problem as well, because Germany is super, I guess, like accustomed to like all different kinds of food choices, and every single time I went to a restaurant, there'd always be loads of different food options. And so yeah, so like what I found the most memorable is honestly the food. It was like there's so many new dishes that I could try, and since Germany was, I guess, like kind of like there's so many other different European countries around it. I also got to try a lot of different cuisines. So for example, there's like beef Wellington. That was kind of like my life dream of trying, and of course I had to try like German beer. Next slide. And so like during the weekends and like with our mandatory day offs, which is 2 days every 4 weeks that you worked, so one thing that my friends and I would do, we would just travel within Germany. So that was super easy. You just hop on a train, and then you'll just or a bus. Especially, and buses were really fast because Germany had like the autobahn. So for large portions of like the freeway, there's no speed limit. So that was really thrilling because like our bus was kind of like, you can see like our bus take over other cars, which is not something that you normally see. And over here is like Berlin, Munich. And then if you go to the next slide. And of course, international travels were also super easy. So in the course of, I was interning for around 3 months, and I was able to kind of sneak, it was a bit rushed, but I was able to squeeze in 8 different countries. And so that was honestly like a really fun time. And just travel, it was my first time in Europe, and it was just super fun to go around with all my friends. And then, so I guess one thing, looking back, one thing that I would have done differently is like people mentioned, it's kind of hard to make friends since one, there's like the language barrier, and two, I guess like German people are more like, kind of like Diana mentioned, it's like you could be acquaintances, but it takes you a while for you to actually be recognized as like friends. But they're also super accepting. So like my friend, I haven't done this, but my friend literally one day got locked out of his house, and he went to a bar, found someone to get a drink, and literally asked if he could crash at their place. And the German person was like, yeah, for sure. So German people are definitely super nice and friendly. And a lesson I learned is, I think honestly, just take risks and try out new things that you've done, because honestly, this was super memorable and awesome time that I had. And I guess last question, would you recommend this work location? And this is I would definitely recommend working in Germany or like Hamburg, Yelp, because it was honestly like the work environment, everything was really awesome. Yeah, that's it for me.
Cool, awesome. Thank you, Patrick. And now we're leaving Europe and moving on to Africa. So Kevin, take it away.
What's up, everybody? My name is Kevin, and I'm going to be talking about my experience at a startup called Jaza Energy that I went to in the fall of 2019. So I guess I'll start off with a bit of what Jaza does. So Jaza, they're a really early stage startup. They're actually a Canadian company that's doing operations in Tanzania. And they are delivering electricity and solar electricity to places that don't have an electrical grid. So essentially what you can see in this picture here is that you see the left little structure. That's like the Jaza logo, and that's what they call the Jaza hub. And these hubs have solar panels on them. And could you go to the next slide, please? And so these hubs, they charge these things called Jaza packs, and they're essentially batteries that people in the local community will come to the hub, and they'll pay a small fee, take the battery back to their house, and they use this battery to power their lights, charge their smartphones, or essentially anything that requires electricity. And then when they're done with that, they come back to the hub and they exchange it and get a new one. And so I was based in, can you go to the next slide, please? Dar es Salaam, Tanzania. So Dar es Salaam is the capital city of Tanzania. It's like actually like a really big city. So even though Tanzania is a developing country, you can see on the right, there's like a pretty sick skyline. And but it's very like scattered. So like there's some areas that's like super developed, and there's some areas that are more rural. So the left is like actually a view from my apartment. And then on the bottom right is actually when we went to go do a work trip to some of the rural areas. And so you can see like the villages there are a lot more rural. Like essentially there's like brick and sheet metal houses. So it's really cool to see all these different environments in one place. Next slide, please. So going into a little bit about my role and what I was doing and sort of my project. So I was an insights intern. So essentially similar to like UX research, if you guys are familiar with it. If you're not, a basic summary is like essentially just doing research or getting information about users or your customers of the company to help make business decisions. So this can involve interviewing them about changes like we made to our product, or running surveys, or analyzing metrics or like quantitative data with Python and SQL, and then bringing that back to the company and leading workshops internally and presentations to actually take what we learn and actually make it like usable and actionable for the company. So you can see a couple pictures that I've presented here. These are actually, so the left is like some of my coworkers. That's a coworker in Baruch and the other coworker, Oprah. So I work really closely with them. And then on the right is actually from a work trip when we went to the rural area to actually interview some of our customers. And if you go to the next slide, this was like a project where we were trying to see and understand how they would use our batteries to power TVs and how that would fit into their lifestyle. So we were like asking questions like about how they balance it with their other applications, like using lights. Like how do you balance like using lights and turning on your TV, which is like a pretty interesting question to like ask like when you're kind of in that sort of environment. And like we also have like these, we can also capture like metrics from how they use the batteries. And so we kind of did some analysis there as well. Could you go to the next slide, please? So in terms of how my typical day or week looked, so we, fortunately, the company Jaza, like they had an apartment for us to stay in. It sounds like pretty similar based off like what a lot of people have mentioned. But yeah, they provided housing. They had an office relatively close to where we were living. And during this opportunity, there was one other co-op with me, and then there was also like a recent graduate from Waterloo, but he was like a full-time. So the three of us would kind of like hang out a lot. We lived together. We would go walk to work together. We would hang out after work together. And yeah, so like on the left, you can see typical Swahili food. So Swahili is like the culture of like Kenya and Tanzania. So it's like a language, and people identify as Swahili. And that dish in the top left is called wali maharage, which literally translates to rice and beans. So it's a lot of like vegetables, rice, and like meat, just the really basic foods. Yeah, but there is actually a lot of expats in Tanzania. So, and especially in Dar es Salaam. So after work, there's actually a lot of places that are like catered to kind of like expats and foreigners. So you can see like there's like this like ice cream place that we went to a lot of the time because it's like pretty hot in Tanzania. So you just like you really crave ice cream. It really hits well. So yeah, next slide, please. So in terms of, I guess, work culture, it was pretty similar because the company was founded by Canadians. So I think they brought some of their like norms and kind of like culture with them, but they did hire a lot of locals. So there's I guess like the mix there. And one thing I did notice was it's they have a bit more of like a authoritative structure. So like there's a lot more like you kind of listen to leadership, and like there's less of like questioning decisions, which was like a bit hard for me to adjust to. But in terms of outside of work, the way I kind of like adjusted and to immerse myself with the local culture was I tried to make an effort to learn as much Swahili as I could. So like I learned the basics like greetings and stuff like that as well. But in terms of like getting around, or even just like things that you would have like to like I asked my coworkers to teach me like conversation starters and things like that. It wouldn't last me very long because like I would ask people things and then like they would respond, but I won't understand or know how to continue the conversation. But usually some people know enough English to like to kind of like have some sort of mutual understanding. So in terms of integrating though, I know like it is hard to kind of like meet locals and become friends with locals. But one thing I would recommend if you're doing like an exchange or like working abroad anywhere, like think about like kind of your interests and your hobbies, and then find people locally that are like interested in the same thing. Because I think otherwise like it's hard because your background is so different, right? So it's hard to like relate to anybody. But if you have like a common interest, like for me, like I breakdance, right? So I tried to like go online and find like breakdancing organizations, and then find people who are like local. And then I like the top left corner is like this bus stop where a few people would meet up and like just dance at night. And so like the picture with me and the two other guys, like those are other dancers that I met. So that was like the one way I made local friends. And that kind of goes into like what I did in my free time. Otherwise, there's like also a lot of expats who, especially from Europe. So like we hung out with some people we met from Germany, and we went out with them a lot. And yeah, that was fun. Next slide, please. What's also really cool is like the nature in Tanzania is like amazing. So the top left corner is a beach. I think it's a Paje on Zanzibar Island. So we got to do some traveling. Zanzibar is like one island off the coast of the mainland of Eastern Africa, off the coast of Tanzania. And it's actually like, if you think of the name Tanzania, the Zan part actually comes from Zanzibar. And so like the bottom left corner is like this like we learned about the African slave trade. We went to a museum there. On the right is like some of the accommodations that we took when we were traveling. Next slide, please. And then we also got to go to the Serengeti. So if you guys don't know like the Serengeti, think of like the Lion King, and like where that takes place. So that's like, it's like one of the national parks. And so it was just like really cool to like, we like camped in the national park, and like we got to see like lions and hippos, and it was like actually really crazy. Yeah, next slide, please. So I know there were some comments about like how did I actually find out and like get this opportunity. So it kind of like landed on my lap because like literally people from at Waterloo, the Waterloo Institute of Sustainable Energy, some people from that, I guess, department of the school came to our class and like just gave us like a presentation advertising these things. So I guess like Waterloo, they had this program to promote companies that are working in the sustainable energy sector. And so there are a bunch of jobs that were sponsored, I think, by this program, like this Queen Elizabeth Scholars Program. And so like, although like I took the job was posted through Waterloo Works, and I just applied sort of through that. And yeah, there was like the pay wasn't very good for the job, but I got a scholarship for taking this job. So that's kind of that. Yeah, I guess some other questions that that were asked was like, what would I have done differently? Honestly, I felt like it was a pretty good time. I wouldn't change much, but maybe just like taking more photos and journaling or like documenting some of my thoughts as I was going through that and some lessons that I learned. For me, so like I come from like a design and like a research background, so like understanding people is like really like top of mind for me, and like how to understand people better. And so it was like you kind of have this experience of being like a foreigner, and then you have like the locals, right? And so like you're like a different person, and like you come from so much like different background, and we're ultimately trying to create a product that like serves them. But what I learned is like it's really really important to involve them in the process. So like I respected the company for really like hiring a lot of locals and having them like be leaders in the company, because although we're bringing our perspective and like our North American perspective, their perspective is just as useful in terms of actually creating solutions that work for them in the long term. And so that just kind of like I brought that back to like the human-centered design process and like how to like design for people who are not yourself. And also just some stuff about working at like a very small stage early startup, very fast paced, had to work long hours sometimes. But yeah. And would I consider going back to this location? Yes, definitely. Because even though there are some like challenges of being in a developing country, you know, there are not a lot of luxuries. Like I had a toilet that couldn't flush for like a long time, and I'd like take a bucket of water and like pour it down the toilet. I still like really really enjoyed the opportunity because it kind of pushed me to like try new things, and I think it mirrors some of what other people are saying. But yeah, I would actually go back and consider finding work there, or even like starting a company, because there's a lot of cool things that you can do there. That's it for me.
Oh, awesome. Thank you, Kevin, for telling us about your time in Tanzania. Next, we're moving on to the continent of Asia, starting with Gracie.
Hi, everyone. This is a little bit of introduction. My name is Gracie. I am going into my 3B term of software engineering at the University of Waterloo. So I'm on co-op right now. So not this co-op term, but the previous co-op term I had, I worked as a UX design intern at this design agency called Edenspiekermann. And Edenspiekermann is a European design agency. So they have offices in Amsterdam and Berlin, but I applied to their Singapore office as well, and I went through the interview process. Got the job, and I decided to go to Singapore. So I applied externally, so they have internship listings on their website periodically for all of these locations. It might be a bit hard right now, but if you are ever considering sort of looking at something a bit outside of tech, which I was at the time, this design agency is something that you can look into. Next slide. Okay, so after I got the job, the pay for most, I think, Asian companies was enough for me to like sort of break even. I don't think I was going into this internship trying to like make any money. It was just more for personal development and like getting to know new things. So I accepted the job, and then I had to apply for the visa. So the Singaporean work visa or the student training visa took around like 3 months to process. And I got the visa like the day I was about to leave for Singapore, which was sort of stressful, but it all worked out in the end. The visa also for Canadian students, they only have like a 3-month long visa. So I only worked in Singapore for 3 months, and I had the last month to just go off on my own. So this is all I took with me to the country, just like a backpack and then like a fanny pack with all my valuables. I previously also worked abroad in Europe, and I overpacked there while I was traveling, so I didn't want to like haul around so many things. So this time I just brought a backpack. And with that being said, because I wasn't getting paid as much, I also applied to scholarships in the university. So the University of Waterloo actually offers a lot of grants and scholarships for work abroad terms or international experiences if you are like not meeting a certain sort of criteria, or like if you're not making as much. So I was able to fund my plane ticket and a bit of my first month's rent from the university. So thank you. Next slide. Yeah, so at the office, the Singapore branch only had like 10 employees at the time. What a day-to-day workday looked like was I would get up. So I lived in downtown Singapore, and I chose to live there because I thought that's like where everything was happening. And I would take the bus to our office, which was on the eastern side of Singapore, and for those of you familiar with like geography, like the Katong area, so it was like the older part of Singapore where they didn't have like a subway, so I had to take the bus there. It was about like a 20 to 30-minute bus ride, which was nice because I got to see like the city. I would get there around like 10, work a bit, I don't know, like have lunch with everyone, and we would sort of have lunch as a team together at all the local restaurants in the area, and then you would work some more and then get off at 6. So it was like a 10 to 6, which is not very different from Canada's 9 to 5. So because this design agency is like, it does have European roots, it does take some like values and company like principles from Europe. So the work-life balance I found like pretty fair, but I did talk to some of like the other Singaporeans I met, and some of the other environments had them working from like, I don't know, like 9 to like 10. So Asian work-life balance is very different from North American and European work-life balance. It's more, I would also, like Kevin, it's more authoritative. There's more of a hierarchy, but I didn't really feel that on my office because my boss was Dutch. Next slide. So Singapore is one of the most, I guess, visibly diverse regions in all of Asia. So there you can sort of find any type of food you want at very little cost. The cost of living there, I would say, is similar to Canada. And adjusting to local culture, for me, I personally didn't have any problems. I think it's because I'm Chinese Canadian, so I speak Mandarin and I speak English, which are the two most widely spoken languages in Singapore. So it was actually, going there was more familiar than if I were to like go to China, for example, because you could go on the streets and then you can just like talk to people in English and then switch to like Mandarin and no one would like, it was sort of like you're talking to someone at home with your like Chinglish or whatever. Yeah, so, and Singaporeans or like Southeast Asia, I find in general, like the culture is definitely more warm and less like isolated than Canadian culture is. So I had no problem like meeting people. I think one thing was I just like talked to random people and then like said yes to everything. So my friends during my stay there ranged from like 2 years younger than me to like 65. And you can meet a lot of different people that way. Yeah, okay, next one. Okay, so like a day, like the projects I worked on at my agency was mostly like product design, consulting, and branding. So I wasn't anyways, I wasn't restricted to one project. I think I worked on multiple projects during my time there. I can't really say what they were on, but some of the clients we worked for was this like art foundation in Dubai. So because it's a design agency, the clients are not like strictly limited to Singaporean clients. So we worked with a lot of different countries. I also worked a lot on projects related to Singaporean government affiliated companies. So like SingPost, so the Singapore Post, postal company, Singtel, the telecommunications company. I also got to work, like one of our clients was also like Singaporean military company. So I got to go into their air base on Huron to do some stuff, which is cool. I don't think I've ever been near anything like military. Yeah. So then some other things were, because it was a design agency, we also worked on a lot of like media related projects. So that meant like filming commercials. So I got to sort of help out with filming and being on like a set, which was really cool. Not something that I don't think I would ever get to do or ever imagine doing. And on the right are some of my coworkers. Yeah, next one. Okay, so there's like a picture missing, but on the weekends, I just went around exploring the city. I didn't really travel outside of the country that much because I just wanted to like, I guess, immerse myself in local culture. So here are just some of the pictures I took. I actually enjoyed like the older parts of Singapore as opposed to what you sort of imagine Singapore to be, which are the high rises and the skyscrapers and like, the financial district. I think there's a lot more culture in these parts and things that you wouldn't really have the opportunity to do if you were just like visiting Singapore. Yeah, next slide. Oh, there. There's a lot of picture. Okay, so I think like by the end of the month, I did everything I could possibly do as a tourist. So I just sort of like settled down. I, like Kevin, like I was there alone, so I didn't really know anyone. So I decided to sign myself up for pole dancing classes. So I went like 3 to 4 times a week. It was a really good way to meet people, hung out with my coworkers, my roommates. So some of my roommates didn't really speak English because they were from like Thailand or like Indonesia. So that was really interesting to communicate, but we became really good friends, I think, by the end of it. Also, I spent a lot of time at the library because they had really like cool library and public resources because my place was sort of small. And they had a lot of like books, and the libraries looked like a lot cooler than the libraries near my home. Next slide. Okay, so after the 3 months, I had a month off. So this is just like, I guess, vacation related pictures. So I decided to spend my month in Thailand, just going around the country because it wasn't Thailand. I didn't know much about it, and it was very close to Singapore. So I just hostel hopped for the month over different regions of Thailand. I met a lot of like people from different places. I made friends with a lot of locals. So Thai people are very, very friendly. Like they would meet you, and then 3 days later they would cook a meal for you, and then like drive you everywhere, which was something that I wasn't used to. But it made me sort of think about how different it is here in Canada, where we have to like make appointments to see people. We're like more, I guess, not as close initially. Yeah, and Thailand's also like a developing country, but they have a lot of like really cool natural like national parks and like areas. So next slide. Yeah, so it was really pretty there. I really enjoyed my time there. I think it's like one of my favorite memories being in Thailand. I got to see a lot of things, a lot of like different like socioeconomic gaps. Like you would be in the city one day, and then you would see everything. You would see like, for example, in Singapore or New York, and then the next day, if you went out to the countryside, you would see like poverty and a lot of like people with no access to electricity and water. So that was really interesting for me to see. Next slide. And yeah, there's like a lot of wild animals and stray animals roaming around in Thailand. That was also something that I don't really see in Canada. But I guess like to answer some of the questions that have been asked, I think one thing that I learned from this experience was just to be open. And it also gave me a lot of time to like, because I was by myself, to like reflect and think about, what makes me happy and how I want to live life, and like what's like sort of to step out of like what I'm used to and the bubble that I'm in, and just appreciate what's around me. Yeah, so that was my presentation.
Cool, awesome. Thank you, Gracie. And next we have Nikhil talking about his time in Tokyo.
Hello. I'll try to keep it short so that we can get to Q&A. Also, I think everyone here already described their experiences really well, and I think I'll be rehashing a lot of stuff. Like, you should do it, and it's going to be incredible. It's really a matter of choosing where. So, well, I can tell you about my experience at Rakuten and how I got it. I think that's also important because I knew a friend who had worked at Rakuten in Japan, and I know they're in Waterworks, but I actually did not get the interview through Waterworks. I got a referral through my friend, and she emailed her manager, and I directly talked to the manager. He really liked me, and got lucky and got the offer. This is to say that take initiative. Like, if you're interested, message any one of us, whichever roles looks interesting to you, and we can help you. I'd be very happy to. I think we all love to talk about our international experiences, and it would be more than happy to help you. I guess like try to do this. Location role companies. I was working at Rakuten. It's an e-commerce company. I was working as a software engineer. It's in Tokyo. And then I was working with a group of researchers. That's not too important. Next slide. So great place. I think it's safer to go with a bigger place, like especially if you're going somewhere that you have no clue about. For me, that was Japan. So they provided the housing, which I thought was pretty great. They had breakfast, lunch, dinner, 40-hour work week. Yes, like Japan, I know, but they were actually pretty reasonable because as I think a lot of other people mentioned, a lot of companies are trying to attract global talent. So for engineering at Rakuten, there's like 40% expats or something. So they really got to have more, I guess, international standards, and so 40 reasonable hours. English at work, so it made it easy. Weekdays were work, like city exploration. Weekends were for trips. That was my usual schedule. Next slide, please. I guess so. This is the most like exciting part, I suppose. I would say like you go there for the work, but work is an excuse. Like really, just like you're there. Like you for work, you try to find people who can guide you to local experiences, and they will be the first like locals you'll interact with, basically, right? So just use them to like what I got out of work was we did like izakaya, or like we would go to like karaoke together. That would be my like first experience of like the cultural experience, and then I would be able to do that with other people because I'm more comfortable. So that's how I kind of took work. And then there was like because it was a reasonably big company, I got to like some people, other people mentioned like finding a community. For me, that was like badminton, so I would like play badminton with some other coworkers because it was part of a club. But really, yeah, you just want to like go out, eat a lot of food, see a lot of things, get. You don't need to find people. Like honestly, just like literally walk out of, take a train. Like Japan is also very connected, so I guess you can go anywhere. In Shinkansen, like which is the bullet train that's everyone likes, and or like subway station, like entire thing is connected. Just like literally hop out, and you'll figure out you'll land in some interesting place, and it'll be a good time. You'll be uncomfortable. That's part of the experience. Stay open to it. Like it's okay. Like if you're tall, get ready to like slouch a bit as you go into washrooms and stuff. Like the sink is a bit lower, but you know that's all. All the things that you look at that I considered foundational to like what must be true about the world was really put into perspective. And that I just put the picture of like that avocado because it's so exquisite. Like, oh my god, I am vegetarian for context, so that's yaki. So that's like fried avocado, and that's the only yaki I could eat. But Japan has a lot of good food if you do eat meat. Let's see. Next slide, please. So some more, I guess, pictures. That's all that's going to happen now. But yeah, just more traveling. Like what I think I remember from most of my time in Japan is I can mention one experience which particularly stands out. My first week, we were the group of 11 intern people at Rakuten. So that's another thing thinking about working in a bigger company. My first weekend, we were all very excited. Like, let's go out and travel. We went to this place, Niku, which was incredibly cold. Tokyo is not that cold. It was like minus 10 degrees or something, and we were definitely not ready for that. So we were out there and had no clue how to find food. There were 7-Eleven there, so it was like something I guess you could eat. But I was having trouble because I'm vegetarian again. So I looked up this one place that I could find which was vegetarian, and I went to this like family-owned restaurant. And they saw me and they were like, "Yeah, we know, like we know you're vegetarian. We see it in your face, like you're like about to cry, like you just want some food." And they were like that's such a kind Japanese like lady, like woman, like she was just like, yeah, she's just saved my life that day, and they were so kind and compassionate. So one thing I would say is like there's a lot of like stereotypes about cultures. Like Japanese people, for example, can seem like distant, or but like when I went on hikes, like everyone would say konnichiwa to me, which is like hello, which is like surprising too. Like I'm brown, it's like definitely like pretty off based on what they would expect, and they seem like they would like still smile. Yes, like they would not like smile with their teeth open or something, but just like stay open to that. You know, like culture stereotypes are. Don't lock yourself in cultural stereotypes. Like for example, like long work weeks in Japan. It really will depend, and we are look for, I guess, like warmth, compassion. Like you have these incredible experiences. That was just one piece of it to try to convince you to go to Japan, because there's so much more if you think you know about Japan. Next slide, please. And that's just like more pretty pictures. That's by my friend. I'm not very great at taking pictures, so the previous ones were just mine. But this is, I think these are some better, more aesthetic pictures of Japan. That is all. But yeah, I'm happy to answer any questions. Feel free to message any of us, I think. But yeah, we can go to Q&A.
Awesome. Thank you, Nikhil, for telling us about your experience in Japan. So yeah, I think we're good to go into the Q&A time. So Clive, who has been collecting the questions for us, will ask the questions.
Hey, can you hear me?
Yes.
Awesome. So yeah, I've been collecting the questions that both from the surveys and from the live chat here. In the interest of time, I've tried to combine them, so hopefully we'll be able to get through them. Yeah, so question 1, how have your prior experiences such as work experience, course marks, language experience, and so on contributed to being able to like get these opportunities, and like how does one prepare?
Clive, do you want any of us to respond, or?
Anyone can respond, yeah.
Okay, cool. Okay, Gracie, go ahead.
Okay, wait, can you repeat the question again?
Yeah, sure. How have your prior experiences, such as work experience, course marks, language experience, and so on, contributed to getting these opportunities? And like, how does one prepare for these international opportunities?
Okay.
Yeah, Diana sent to the chat, and also I guess maybe people can like raise their hands, and then I'll call on people. Yeah, but yeah, Gracie, go.
Okay, so I have like bad grades, so like that doesn't matter. I think it didn't matter for Singapore, and it didn't matter for Cognite, even though they asked like in their bullet point they said high grades. I was like, no, just apply anyways, which turned out well. In terms of like language, I think it benefited me that I knew how to speak Chinese when I applied to Singapore, and then. Oh, and then as like a design intern, you usually want to have like a portfolio. I think that matters more than what you study and like your education. Maybe not your education, but what you study. And yeah, I think those like things helped me get that job.
Cool. Does anyone else want to answer that question?
I can add a quick thing where, yeah, like I knew this was something I wanted to do, and so I knew friends who were doing it, and that reaching out to them was one piece that helped me get the job. As I mentioned, that I did not get it through the standard Waterloo work system. Also, one thing to mention, like nothing can prepare you. Like if you're going for a true culture shock, like nothing can prepare you. So yeah, I know we are like all planners at Waterloo, but like come on, just try to get ready to be blown away.
And then quickly on the language notes, so Switzerland, like Zurich spoke German. I knew like essentially zero German for like the first month, but it really helped that I knew French because like most signage was written in all three of the main languages in Switzerland, like French, German, and Italian. So sometimes knowing like an adjacent language helps with the day-to-day life.
Cool. All right. So next question here is, what are the logistics and timeline of the job hunt? Because like presumably that's different than inside Canada and the US. Like job process, timeline, interviewing remotely, and all of that. Yeah, go ahead, Sharon.
I'm just going to speak really quickly on it because for me, I didn't actually apply directly. I had come back from the same company, just jumping to a different location. But the thing is, I have seen London software engineering internship openings on Facebook career pages. So as far as I've seen in terms of their internship program, it does follow a similar schedule as the ones we're familiar with out here in North America.
Also to add, I guess my perspective from Cognite specifically, or I guess Norway, something to note is that although Cognite follows the Waterloo Works timeline, the Norwegian government is super slow at processing visas. So I actually didn't get my visa until the very end of my internship. which was pretty shitty. So that's something definitely to note if you're considering Norway or Cognite. I'm not sure if Gracie had a similar experience, but yeah.
I actually got my visa before I went. I don't know.
Oh wow.
There's no like pattern.
Yeah, I don't. Maybe it depends on your term, but everyone, like all the interns I was with, they also got it towards the end. So maybe it depends on like the season. But yeah.
Right. Next question. So, how did you decide to go international once you had the offer? Like, it's not always a trade-off, of course, but like, would you weigh the work experience more, or would you weigh like being able to go international more? Anyone want to talk about it, Patrick?
Oh,
Yeah, so I feel like there's no right answer to this. It's kind of more what you want like individually. Like maybe like I feel like international travel is probably like definitely going to be more fun and exciting, but like I guess like your personal development, that kind of really depends on like the company. And then oftentimes like since we're in North America, we might not, a lot of like European companies we're not like familiar with. So like your experience like learning wise could be like career development wise could be good or bad. Whereas like if you go to like let's say like a known US company, then like I guess for sure you might have you develop career wise, but then I guess it may not be as exciting because if you've been to US already like a few times, then it's kind of like a second home to you now. So I think that really depends on like what you want to get out of your internship.
Okay. Cool. So next question is pretty interesting. Did any of you experience any racism abroad, or like did you feel safe? This is actually one of the more recent questions in the chat.
wait,
Were
sorry, can
there
we
any
quickly go
violent
back?
crimes?
I think Kevin wanted to speak on the last question.
Oh, sorry.
Oh, I can speak on both of these questions.
Sure,
So
go ahead.
the last one, I feel like, yeah, for me, the way I like thought about the like trade-off, like I just felt like there were more opportunities to do more like typical like working within North America stuff. So like when this one came out, I was like, this seems like so different. Like when am I going to have the opportunity after like school to like spend 4 months in a place? So that was kind of how I like thought about it. But yeah, definitely like I feel like if you are interested in it, you kind of like know if it's something that you're like you want to do. In terms of like the safety thing, I feel like I have like a like because I was in like a more developing country. Like generally it was okay. But I know that like there was a previous intern that was like a girl, and she like sort of faced like some like harassment at certain points. But like I know that like even after like she experienced those things, like she still like overall enjoyed the opportunity, and she had like she found like ways to kind of like stay safe. She just had to find out those things, and they were different for her. I can't say too much because I don't know like all the details. And was there another part to the question about safety?
No, mainly just like safety and yeah, also racism abroad potentially because coming from a different country.
Yeah, I guess for racism, like one thing when I went to the more rural area, like there were a lot of people I guess didn't see somebody who looked like me before, so they would just say like they would say China, which means like a single Chinese person. They would just like kind of point and like stare and kind of say that comment. But I kind of like was prepped for that from like some of my coworkers before I went, so I kind of like expected it, and I don't think anybody ever did it out of like a malicious way. It was more of like curiosity, so it didn't bother me too much.
I'm also gonna quickly talk on. Oh, sorry, I should raise my hand and stuff. But in Zurich, like I said, it was like very diverse in terms of like Europeans, but like not really much else. So like thinking back, like number of like Asian-looking women, I saw at the office, which was like apparently 2,000 people. There was like 5. So there were very few of us. Well, I never experienced racism, like outward racism in the office or like in the city. My mentor, who's Portuguese, so he like looks white, told me that he once was like on a train and that he was speaking on his phone in Portuguese, and some like angry, presumably like local person like yelled at him in like German. So racism does exist. Yeah. Nikhila? Oh, and Gracie.
I just wanted to say a quick thing. Like, I did feel like it's possible that in some rural places that I went, I was probably the first or only brown person that's seen that month. I did feel safe. I would say like Japan is the safest place I think to get lost, if depending on your background. Like if you want a complete culture shock, and very safe. Yeah, it's slightly racist, but you should be fine. Still, they're still very kind to you.
Gracie.
Yeah, Gracie, go ahead.
So for working in Asia, this is not so much working, because in Singapore, I don't think I stood out very much. But in Thailand, when you're like traveling alone generally, and generally like as a female, I got catcalled like a couple of times, and like some like remarks that I don't really have like a direct translation to, but like beyond that, I think that was like the extent of it, but it was still sort of uncomfortable. But I guess like just generally, like if you're traveling alone, and especially as like a girl, like if you're going out late at night, like just have someone with you, or like have like a plan or something.
Okay. Thanks. Thanks, everyone. So next question is, on a high level, what are the cost of living and like travel logistics, stuff like that? Like there's visas, there's like plane tickets. How does all of that work? Yep, go ahead, Patrick.
Yeah, so at least like in Europe, if you want to be budget, you could be budget. I guess like there's like really low budget, I guess like transportations like Flixbus or Ryanair, where you could literally get a flight for like 30 euros if you plan ahead, or like a bus for like 5 to 10 euros. But that like, so obviously the experience, like they're pretty like, you're not going to get like a premium experience, but it gets the job done. You're still going to safely arrive at your destination. And then so I guess traveling, at least in Europe, like European countries, because it's like the Schengen area. So once like you're kind of in, you could travel freely. So that was really convenient.
That's cool. Did Nikhil? Did you raise your hand?
Thing on like for at least Rakuten, they sponsored visa. They handle everything. Like they provided local housing as well. Weekday food, as I said, breakfast, lunch, dinner. On getting around, there are yes, it's like pretty. So Japan is all very connected through subway, so it's pretty easy to get around. It's not that expensive either.
Cool. So Leslie?
Yeah, just a quick note. So I mentioned this during the talk as well, but like Norway is, I think, like the 4th most expensive country to live in the world. So it's like super expensive for buying anything, buying food, experiences in general. So that's definitely something to note if you're considering traveling there. If you're planning to live there, the reason why everything is so expensive is because the public services are so good, and minimum wage is close to like $30 Canadian, which is super great. But as a tourist, it's not so great because everything is really expensive. So yeah, you just have to make some adjustments to the way that you live if you're used to buying stuff a lot and eating out.
Cool. So Kevin?
Yeah, just a quick note for at least in Tanzania, like there was definitely like a foreigner experience and like a local experience. So like if you wanted to live more like a local and eat more like Swahili food, like you could eat like a meal for like $2 Canadian. But if you had like missed any food from home, like if you want like a hamburger or like wings or like even from like other countries, it'd be like North American prices approximately. So that was like one thing I want to call out.
Cool. So I know that we're like a minute over time right now, and there is like still like a lineup of questions. So if the speakers have some time, like maybe like another 10 minutes, we'll those who can stay on, like we'd love for you to answer some more questions. But just for everyone who is here, I will just kind of also give the wrap up spiel first too, in case people have to leave early. So I did want to thank everyone who is here for coming today. I personally learned a whole lot from like all the speakers and their experiences. And so if you, the participants of the call, enjoy our event today, we are hiring organizers for the fall 2020 term. So the apps are open, and head over to our Facebook page to find it. And we're just under Tech Plus Mentorship. And like our page to stay updated with our news. And yeah, so for those who can stay, like, let's get back into the Q&As.
Yeah, there's a few more questions left. Everyone's fine with staying, right? Cool. All right. So, how did you get socially connected and make friends? Like, was it difficult making friends initially?
I guess I'll go because I don't see any other hands.
Go ahead.
Yeah, I did find it like harder to make friends because I think everyone else here, like, I went on my own, and so I didn't like know anyone else like in Switzerland. So not just like in Zurich or at the company. And I think what I found helpful was like I started this like intern, like recurring weekly intern lunch at work. I just threw it on like all the interns' calendars, and then at least that way it forced those of us who were like social enough to meet up to get to like know each other and make some friends from there.
Cool. Sharon?
Yeah, so back to the BFF perks that Facebook has, that was a really great way to meet a bunch of people while trying out a bunch of new activities as well. But I might add that London's age demographic is a little bit older, so a lot of the people had like families that they would go home to, so it was understandable that you didn't actually get to meet and hang out of work with like everyone on your team, or like, so that made sense. But in terms of meeting other people, our intern batch was actually kind of large for a fall term. It was around 30, maybe 40 people. I don't quite remember, but I was the only North American, and so everyone else was just like Diana said, there were just like a bunch of different Europeans. So it's like diverse. But anyways, yeah. So we did kind of hang out. I know there were like kind of cliques between the interns, very separated by their backgrounds, evidently. But yeah, it was like the interns would hang out outside of work and stuff, and yeah.
Cool. Does anyone else want to speak to that? Nikhil?
Sure. I mean, I think being at work helps. Like, you can talk to like some of the other people, your coworkers, just randomly reach out to them. But also, you don't need friends. Just like go out by yourself. It's fine.
Yeah. True. Definitely important to get the experiences you want to have. Cool. So one more question, or maybe a couple more. How different is it to work at a company abroad versus the same company in Canada or the US? For, I think, Dana and Sharon? Jada, if you want to talk?
I think both of us touched on it a little bit in our presentation, but Brian, cool. But I think it's fairly similar. Like the main difference was just like there's like a language difference, cultural difference, but like the way the company worked was pretty similar. There was a difference when it came to like working at the HQ of the company versus like at its satellite office, but that's like a difference that would exist like at all the satellite offices, not just ones like outside of North America.
Yeah, and just quickly, Diana was saying, it's like, it's the same company, and at a certain point, culture is ingrained in all of them. And so, like, even working out of the London office, we would fly to headquarters in Menlo Park. We did a summit that we participated in, and so everyone's just really integrated with each other. It's not like it's a different company altogether. It's just they're just part of the separate office. And back to the headquarters point, I never worked out of HQ, so probably the differences there might be a little bit separate, but for the most part, it's like, yeah, maybe just the age demographic for one was a kind of a larger one for me, yeah.
All right. So one more question. What are some tips for first-year students to get an international internship? I guess we touched a little bit on preparation, but maybe in some more detail as a less experienced student, how do you get a head start?
Maybe something I'll say is, I think Nikhila talked about this a bit in his presentation, but just to like if you're interested, like start looking around to find out what's available. So like coming to this call is like a great way to just know that like which companies offer internships abroad and what kind of roles, and then continue to do that research so that like even if you're not applying now, like in the future when it's time for you to apply, like you know where to look.
Anyone else want to comment on tips to prepare? All right, Kevin?
Yeah, I can say, I mean, it's sort of similar, I guess, just like in general finding job advice. But if you don't have experience, like bringing like enthusiasm and like being like keen about things, like doing research, like coming to events like this, and like if you can articulate like why like the international experience is like important to you or why you want to do it, and like you can communicate that to whoever you're reaching out to in companies, like I think just that genuine like interest can come through.
Awesome.
Yeah, just to add on to Kevin's point, show interest in your application, like either through a cover letter or sending an email in the country that the company is in. So I remember advice I got for Cognite was to show interest in Norwegian culture, and that's what I did in my cover letter. So definitely mention like maybe specific aspects of the culture that you like to explore or places you like to travel, because it definitely helps a lot.
Cool. ACI asks, how do you get over your fear of eating alone? Leslie?
Eating alone is the biggest power move. You just gotta reframe it. It's honestly like, it's so badass to like go somewhere and eat alone. It's honestly a different experience, but yeah, I would just say reframing it, getting a different perspective.
Sharon?
I mean, I don't think I ever had a problem with being alone, but I do know that is like a general concern. When I first started, it's like I had to eat, right? So like at a certain point, it's like I don't know anyone here, so like I was saying, it's not. I don't mind. I really like going out eating by myself. Like I try to do activities by myself that I would usually do with other people. Actually, in London, I went to my first concert by myself. I went to see Sabrina Claudio, which I tried to make a BFF for at work. But yeah, just like, again, with the trying new things and seeing how it goes, is kind of the mindset I feel like a lot of us have, in the sense that we've even gone to this other country that we've never worked in before or even been to before. And to just be there for 4 months to try it out is kind of like, try it out and see how you like it, and you might just discover something new. So.
Agreed.
Yeah. Also, I think it's really uncomfortable to, at least for me, it was like really uncomfortable to do at the start, but you just like keep pushing yourself, and then like after a while, you're like, yeah, like whatever. Like you walk, and like Leslie said, like it's a power move. Like you walk confidently into a restaurant, and you're like for your eins or like for one or something, and then you sit down at your table and you do whatever you want and you eat. Yeah. Any last thoughts on this question? Cool. If not, then I think we'll wrap it up here. I do know did see some other questions come in, but we're also like 11 minutes over, so I do want to let folks go. But just wanted to thank everyone again, and especially the speakers. Your time here today was so appreciated. So thank you again for doing this, and thank you for everyone who came out today. And yeah, so we'll wrap it up here. Enjoy the rest of your weekend.